Craig is a guy who just wants to retire and escape responsibilities, but by accident, he ends up becoming the leader of a clan of super powerful hunters. Even though he's ordinary and has no idea what he's doing, everyone thinks he's a genius. Now, he tries to survive dangerous missions while pretending to be the amazing leader everyone believes him to be. Craig is the revered leader of the world's most powerful clan, the Grieving Soul, and his wisdom and strength have made him a living legend. However, behind this glorious facade hides a man who, at his core, is weak and consumed by a desperate desire to escape his responsibilities. All Craig wants is to abandon this role that drains him, but unfortunately, his fate seems sealed. Today, we see Craig standing in line at a treasure hunter gathering, and it's clear he doesn't want to be there. His weary expression leaves no doubt. The last thing he wants is to participate in this charade. But he's trapped, with no other choice. Treasure hunters are the stars of this world, revered as heroes for risking their lives in vaults filled with riches, facing ghosts and unspeakable threats, all without even the comfort of health insurance. It's a dangerous and thankless occupation. But the promise of fame and fortune entices dozens of hopefuls every year. They flock to join clans like the renowned First Steps, known in the capital as one of the best ever. This clan is a coalition of groups helping each other, bound by survival. And that's why so many people are here today. Unless you're a prodigy like Jin Woo, it's impossible to advance much as a solo hunter. Craig, as usual, tries to blend into the shadows, hoping everything will end quickly. However, his attempt to disappear among the others is interrupted when a soft voice behind him calls out. A young woman asks if he's also there to join a group. Craig, his patience worn thin, resorts to the old tactic of ignoring the speaker, hoping she'll get tired and leave. But before he knows it, she's already standing in front of him, a gentle smile on her face.
My name is Ruda,
She says, extending her hand in greeting. Craig, with a disinterested nod, murmurs his name, refusing to shake her offered hand. Ruda's smile falters briefly, but she recovers and starts talking nonstop. Ruda, a level 3 hunter, shares that she had been hunting alone until she encountered a vault called the White Wolf's Denver. Unable to face it alone, she's now looking to join a group. At that moment, the man ahead of them turns around and, in a condescending tone, tells Ruda she's crazy for attempting such a dangerous vault while still only a level 3 novice. He laughs, calling her an inexperienced amateur. Ruda, suddenly furious, bites her lip, her eyes blazing with anger. And at that moment, Craig deeply regrets not staying home. The metallic flash of Ruda's knives gleams for an instant, and she's about to strike the man. The air between them becomes thick, the tension unbearable. But before the situation gets out of hand, a guard approaches, reprimanding Ruda. He reminds her that they're not in the dark alleys of London, and if she continues, she'll be banned from the clan meeting. With a heavy sigh, Ruda puts her weapons away and apologizes, visibly frustrated. Craig, once again, tries to fade into the crowd, wishing to disappear. When they finally make it into the meeting, Craig can't seem to shake off Ruda. She, dazzled by the strength and prestige of the other hunters, looks like a child in front of a whole new world. Have you been here before? She asks, a bit anxious. Craig, with little emotion, responds that this is the 5th time he's attended this meeting. Ruda looks at him with a mixture of pity and disapproval. You must be a terrible hunter if you have to keep coming back here, she thinks, but doesn't dare say out loud. Among hunters, talent is everything. Even the most anonymous can, with determination and skill, rise to the top. As they observe the room, Ruda notices a group on the other side, their opulent outfits standing out from the rest. Who are they? She asks. Craig explains that they are the Ark Brave group, the most powerful one recruiting today. They're a legend, having conquered a level 7 vault with only 6 members. Being recruited by Ark Roden, their leader, is practically a guarantee of success in a hunter's career. Ruda, fascinated, continues to take in everything around her until she notices an empty table in the corner. She barely has time to ask about it before the man from earlier, the one who insulted her, reappears, offering to explain. Reluctantly, Ruta listens as he tells the story of the table, belonging to the group that founded the clan, the Griers, also known as the Grieving Souls. What no one knows, however, is that the legendary Grieving Souls are Craig's childhood friends. Rumors indicated they would be recruiting today, but the absence of the team suggests the rumors were false. At that moment, a young man who came to sign up for the Grieving Souls group realizes they haven't arrived yet. Arrogantly, he becomes furious, claiming he will become the strongest hunter in the world, and no other group is worth his time. Craig watches with a slight smile, finding the scene somewhat comical, while Ruta feels intimidated. The boy, after all, is a higher level than she is. The situation would escalate into a confrontation, but then a girl named Tino intervenes, determined to silence the boy with violence. For her, it's unacceptable that someone inferior dares to dream of joining the Grieving Souls. The tension in the room rises. Tino is ready to strike, and for a moment, it seems the fight will be avoided. However, Craig's provocation lights the fuse, and suddenly everyone in the room is encouraging the confrontation. Tino and the boy prepare to fight, the air boiling with imminent chaos. Craig, sensing things are about to get out of control, asks Ruta to follow him outside. But before they can leave, Tino senses a familiar presence. Her face changes instantly, and she rushes toward Craig. "Master," she exclaims, nervously asking if he saw her slip up. Craig, surprised, steps back as Ark Roden, the legendary leader of Ark Brave, approaches to greet him. Finally, the truth is revealed. Craig, the reluctant one, the weakling trying to escape attention, is the master of the Grieving Souls clan, and no one could have imagined. The impact of this revelation shocks everyone around. Now, all eyes are on him, and the weight of responsibility suffocates him once again. Craig, fighting back panic, wants only one thing: to leave, far away from it all. When Craig and his friends arrived in the capital, they were clearing out all the beginner vaults in record time. However, there was a problem. Craig had no idea what he was doing. On one of these occasions, he was saved from being devoured by a monster, but his teammates thought he had purposely let his guard down to act as bait. With no other choice, Craig went along with the story, but in reality, he was about to be eaten. They all shared the same dream, to become exceptional hunters. But unlike the other five, Craig was painfully ordinary. He knew that sooner or later, he would become a burden to the group, and he didn't want his friends to despise him for his weakness. So, he made a difficult decision: he would leave the group on his own. However, when he tried to resign, things took an unexpected turn, and he ended up being named team leader. That's how he assumed his current position as leader of his incredibly talented childhood friends. But deep down, he just wished he could retire from the life of a hunter. Ruta and Greg still couldn't believe they had been talking to the clan master the whole time. As Craig sat in his chair, Ark approached and asked if he had arrived late on purpose to observe the crowd, as if he were one of the commoners. Craig denied it, explaining that he had simply overslept. But Ark, as usual, wasn't listening, firmly convinced that Craig had arrived late on purpose. No matter how much Craig tried to explain, people always interpreted him in a way that made him seem better than he actually was. Kay, on the other hand, didn't like the closeness between Ark and Craig at all and wanted to kick him out of the clan. But Craig wasn't willing to do that. Tino, a level 4 hunter, was an apprentice of one of Craig's childhood friends, Liz, and thus spent a lot of time around him. Ark asked Craig if he had any good candidates in mind for recruitment, but honestly, there was no need for new members in the clan at the moment. However, since Ark rarely recruited new members, Craig seized the opportunity and asked if Ark would seriously consider any recommendation he made. Ark responded that he would accept anyone chosen by Craig, which surprised everyone. The vice captain tried to dissuade him from such a hasty decision, but Ark interrupted, stating that anyone chosen by Craig would be worthy of joining his group. Tino started to blush, thinking Ark was considering recommending her, but she didn't like him much and was torn between accepting or not. Suddenly, the boy from earlier, whose name was Gilbert, stepped forward from the crowd, ready to beg if necessary to be accepted by Craig. Craig tried to think if Gilbert would be a good choice, but quickly gave up since he was terrible at judging people's character. Not knowing if someone would be strong in the future, Craig decided to let fate decide. He told Gilbert that he was willing to recommend him, but there was one condition. As a hunter, the most important thing is to ensure you always win. If he lacked strength, he would endanger the lives of his companions. So, Craig wanted him to demonstrate his ability to always win. Craig then removed one of his magic rings and announced to all the hunters present that the first person to present the ring to Ark would be accepted into his group. With that, he threw the ring into the crowd, awaiting the chaos. Gilbert was the first to grab the ring, but that didn't last long, as Tino leaped on him, hitting him so hard he was sent to the other side of the room. Gilbert probably needed a doctor, but no one was focused on him as the ring rolled across the floor. Initially, everyone hesitated, but soon they began to fight for it. At this point, Craig decided to leave. And even though the bar was being destroyed, he walked out, muttering that it wasn't his problem, and went home. However, the next morning, it became his problem. The fight in the bar made front-page headlines, and apparently, the entire place was destroyed because of the brawl, though fortunately, there were no civilian casualties. In the end, Eva informed him that the Explorers Association wanted a private meeting with him, and Craig already knew what that meant. They were going to scold him. He asked how Ark reacted to the news, and Eva told him that Ark took it well and even laughed about the situation. With Ark not being angry, Craig wanted to take advantage of his good mood to send him the bill for the bar's reconstruction, as well as ask him to handle the association's meeting. But Eva informed him that the meeting was specifically for him, so there was no way to avoid it this time. Even if he tried to ignore it, the association's manager, Gar, would come after him, as he always did. So, Craig gave in and agreed to attend the meeting, but he planned to use his secret weapon, begging and apologizing. He argued that the only damage was to the bar, and since no one was hurt and the bar owner had been compensated, there shouldn't be any more issues. Gar didn't even have a chance to yell at Craig, as upon seeing him apologize, he decided to let the matter go for now. However, even without official complaints against him, Craig still needed to take responsibility for his actions. That's when Gar assigned him a mission, without giving him the right to refuse. The association receives all kinds of missions for hunters, but with the large volume, some are so difficult or pay so little that no one wants to take them. These missions are known as chores, and Craig really didn't want to deal with one of those. He tried to pretend he was too important to be assigned such a mundane task, but Gar didn't let him escape this time, forcing him to choose. Craig opened the mission book and began searching for the easiest one. Among all those available, the lowest level was 3, so he chose that one. He planned to pass the job to Ark, but when he went to look for him, he was informed by Tino that Ark was in a meeting with some nobles and would be away for a while. With few options left to get rid of the job, Craig noticed that Tino was wearing his ring, meaning she had won the game the day before. Setting that aside, he asked if she was free at the moment. Tino, excited, thought he was going to ask her out, but to her disappointment, Craig said he had a mission for her. She immediately ran off, but even though she was fast, Craig had his methods. He summoned his chain hound, Silver, and ordered it to capture Tino. It didn't take long before she was tied to a chair as Craig explained the mission. Tino felt betrayed, as she had just wanted to go on a date with Craig, but now he was forcing her to take on a terrible mission alone. Craig asked if the problem was that she didn't want to do the mission alone, and Tino responded that she wouldn't mind if Craig went with her. However, that would mean Craig would have to do real work, so he opted to send Tino with a group of hunters he had met the day before. 6 years ago, when Craig's group first arrived in the capital, they were ready to join the guild and register as hunters. But when they reached the door, Craig began to have doubts. Luke, ever confident, told him to stop worrying since it was Craig himself who suggested they should be the best in the capital. The problem was that Craig wasn't doubting Luke's strength, he knew he would end up dragging the whole group down. Luke, however, ignored these concerns, pushed open the guild doors with confidence, and declared himself the strongest swordsman in the world. Shortly after, Liz followed suit, proclaiming herself the strongest thief in the world. After such a grand entrance, there was no turning back. Craig approached the reception to register the group, but secretly wished they had regretted choosing him as their leader. When it came time to name the group, Craig, without thinking much, chose something dark, soul lamenting. The others found the name a bit heavy and melancholic, but when Craig tried to use his terrible taste in names as an excuse to step down as leader, everyone changed their minds and said they loved the name. Now, in the present, Craig calls a meeting with the people he wants to delegate his work to. Greg, incredulous, still can't accept that Craig is the leader of the famous guild Soul Lamenting. And even harder to believe, Craig is the infamous Thousand Tricks, a legend in the guild. When a hunter reaches a certain level of accomplishments, they earn a special title and become practically a celebrity. Craig's title ended up being Thousand Tricks, but Gilbert refuses to believe he is that strong, especially since Craig never seems to train. Tino, ever loyal, defends Craig, saying Gilbert is weak for not understanding Craig's power. Craig, unsure what power she's talking about, simply accepts the undeserved praise. In any case, Craig asks if they will accept the job, but Gilbert refuses, still not believing Craig is the strongest in the city. Greg tries to get Gilbert to stop talking, fearing what might happen if they irritated the most powerful person in the capital. But Gilbert doesn't care and pokes Greg in the nose. Seeing that Gilbert won't cooperate, Craig simply gives up on convincing him and turns to Greg, who promptly accepts the request. The last one to be consulted is Ruta. Since the mission involves the Wolf Den, Craig thinks it would be perfect for her, who already wanted to clean the place out. Although she's not exactly excited about the team, Ruta agrees to go. Satisfied, Craig tells Tino that if she needs more help, she can ask someone from the guild. Tino, however, begs Craig to join the team, but he firmly refuses. With that settled, Craig turns to leave, but Gilbert, irritated at being ignored, challenges Craig to a duel. If he loses, he agrees to join the team. Craig hates being challenged, so he finds a simple solution. He accepts the duel but puts Tino in his place. Furious at Gilbert's disrespect toward her master, Tino accepts the challenge. Moreover, she sees it as a chance to impress Craig, already thinking about how her pose would look perfect with good camera angles. Gilbert, who had been beaten by Tino the day before, tries to redeem himself, claiming he was caught off guard and won't lose again. Craig, already tired of all this, comments that Tino is level 4, just like Gilbert. Tino, full of confidence, throws her weapons on the ground, asserting that there's no way she can lose to someone like him. Ruta and Greg start to worry. After all, even though Tino is stronger, fighting without weapons is an unnecessary risk. Normally, Tino would have the advantage, as despite being at the same level, she earned all her levels in solo missions and has plenty of experience in human combat. But Gilbert possesses the Eternal Flame Sword, which could turn the tide, if he knew how to use it properly. In a foolish gesture of pride, Gilbert also throws his sword to the ground, determined to fight on equal terms. Now, Tino is sure she will win and even makes plans to get ice cream with Craig afterward. When the fight begins, Tino charges forward and lands a punch on Gilbert's face. He tries to dodge, but ends up taking a kick. He is knocked back, just like the day before. The fight seems over, but to his surprise, Gilbert gets up and continues. He doesn't make much progress and soon gets pinned down, but at least he shows determination. Eventually, he breaks free from Tino's hold but is knocked down again with a blow to the back of his neck. This time, he won't get up. Tino celebrates and thanks Craig for helping her become so strong, even though Craig has never done anything to train her. Greg and Ruta are astonished by Tino's strength, while Gilbert refuses to accept the reality that someone is stronger than him. Since the day he first picked up a sword, Gilbert knew he was destined to be a hunter. He always surpassed professional swordsmen, and when he finally registered, he formed a group and started exploring dungeons. Until now, he had never tasted defeat. Tino, despite not liking him much, acknowledges Gilbert's skill and encourages him to pick up his sword. But Gilbert's pride speaks louder, and he refuses. Tino is disappointed because she knows this kind of pride can get someone killed. Deep down, Gilbert knows she's right. At that moment, Craig calls out to Gilbert and guesses that he must have left his old group due to the strength difference. Gilbert is shocked because Craig hit the nail on the head. Craig mentions that he went through something similar with his group, even though he never left, even if he might have wanted to. Gilbert takes this to mean that Craig is much stronger than everyone else in the Soul Lamenting group, giving him a new perspective on what it means to be the strongest. Craig then notices Gilbert's sword and lightly touches it. Suddenly, the sword unleashes enormous flames, far greater than anything Gilbert has ever achieved. And Craig didn't even need to hold the sword by the hilt. In this world, there is a substance called mana, which is invisible but condenses into various physical forms within treasure chests. The wolf den is one of these chests, and it is said that ghostly wolves appear there, covered in blood. Craig is quite happy to have sent the others there and not have to go himself. Eva questions whether it was a good idea to send inexperienced hunters, but Craig believes the group will manage, since the den is only level 3, and the 4 of them are quite skilled. Additionally, Craig wanted to thank Eva for the information she provided about Gilbert. It was hilarious to see his face when Craig started guessing a bunch of things about the guy's past. Eva was happy to help, but soon wanted to know how Craig managed to use Gilbert's artifacts so easily. Craig explained that the artifact was quite simple to control, and even Gilbert, with all his inexperience, managed to handle it without much training. So, for him, what he did wasn't a big deal. But let's be honest, Craig loves collecting artifacts and is already thinking about asking Gilbert to sell him the sword. Eva, however, dismissed the idea right away. After all, Craig already spends a good portion of his budget on artifacts, and his collection is gigantic. It doesn't make sense to want another one. Craig argued that each artifact is unique, and even though he has over 20 rings, he can always want more. Eva realized she wasn't going to convince him, but still, she didn't want him to spend everything on artifacts. The money from the Soul Lamenting group is divided equally among the members, regardless of what each contributes. So even if Craig hardly does anything, he still gets well paid at the end of the month. Craig didn't want to give up his collection, so when he realized that one of his artifacts needed recharging, he used that as an excuse to leave the conversation. He went to a guild member, asked for help to recharge the artifact with magic, and of course, everyone was happy to help since Craig always does a lot for them. While the artifact was being recharged, a man told Craig about a cloaked ghost that appeared on the road to the north and destroyed a caravan. There were 3 level 3 hunters guarding the caravan, so the ghost must be strong. The Knights of the Third Order are recruiting an extermination group to deal with it. The report stated that the ghost was a wolf and that the location wasn't far from the White Wolf Denver. This could indicate that the wolf population was increasing, which means the den was full of enemies. Anyone who went down there would be in trouble. Craig tried to push these thoughts away and convinced himself that Tino's group was probably fine. But then people around him began to comment that the monsters in the White Wolf Den were getting much stronger, and the guild was thinking of raising the threat level. In fact, a group of level 5 spearmen had disappeared there, and Craig realized that no one below level 5 could handle that. Now, Craig really started to worry and decided to take a look at the mission he received earlier. To his surprise, he was supposed to rescue that level 5 spearman and his group. He should have read the mission details before sending Tino and the others there, but now it was too late to call them back. The people at the table noticed that Craig was acting strangely and asked if everything was okay. He then revealed that he had sent Tino to the White Wolf Denver. The horrified reactions were immediate upon learning that he sent Tino, who was only level 4, to a place where a level 5 group couldn't win. They thought Craig must have known about the danger and sent Tino as part of a training exercise. After all, what kind of irresponsible teacher would send their student on a deadly mission without researching first? Craig suddenly stood up, saying he had something urgent to resolve. As soon as he left through the corridors, he began to panic, trying to convince himself that Tino was quite skilled and might manage. Besides, Gilbert was almost as strong as her, as long as he was using his flame sword. But Craig remembered that he had used all the sword's power in the demonstration. If Gilbert didn't recharge it afterward, the sword would be practically useless. When Tino and the others were approaching the White Wolf Den, they felt a dangerous aura even before arriving. Tino had been expecting something like this. After all, it was Craig who sent her on this mission. So, she even wrote a will, just as a precaution, but she was confident she wouldn't die, believing everything had been perfectly calculated by Craig. She believed that Craig's choice of sending them on the mission was a very deliberate decision, but Greg thought that was impossible since Craig had only met them the day before. Gilbert agreed that it was unlikely, but he also wouldn't doubt that Craig could have researched them before they even met. In fact, the whole situation in the bar was probably part of his plan. So, even knowing this mission was far beyond their level, Tino was sure that Craig wouldn't send them into something without a chance of survival. Unfortunately, that's exactly what Craig did, and now he was freaking out because of it. He decided he would need to go personally to rescue them. So, he went to his secret room and started gathering all the artifacts he could carry. As he left, Eva saw him and assumed that Craig had intentionally sent Tino on that dangerous mission just to test her. Although Craig had planned everything so that she wouldn't actually be in danger, she knew he was also worried, which is why he was going to check on how they were doing. She even noticed that Craig was carrying the Shore Sludge artifact, which was technically illegal to possess under Imperial law, but he wanted to be prepared for whatever he might face. Craig then headed to the balcony and equipped a winged suit artifact, ready to reach the White Wolf Den as quickly as possible. When he left, Eva hoped he would manage to come back safely, as the last person who used that winged suit died after crashing into a wall. After a long and arduous battle, Tino and the others finally managed to bring down the wolf. Greg breathes a sigh of relief, but Tino doesn't share the sentiment. To her, the team didn't perform well. There was only one wolf, they had the numerical advantage, yet it was still a difficult fight. At this moment, Greg questions Gilbert about why he didn't use the fire sword, since it would have made things much easier. Gilbert explains that the sword is out of mana, which is strange because he was sure he recharged it a few days ago. He then realizes that the relic must have been drained by Craig's attack, and there's no way to recharge it here. At the moment, it's just an ordinary sword. Ruda suggests that maybe it would be better to head back, given that the mission has proven to be much more dangerous than expected. Greg agrees, saying that, under these conditions, it's likely that the people they came to rescue are already dead, so continuing would be pointless. But Tino is firm and makes it clear that they will stick to the plan, no matter what. Greg tries to argue that their lives are more important than a mission to recover bodies, but Tino interrupts him, explaining that this isn't a simple body retrieval. She's certain the targets are still alive inside the vault, because it was Craig who sent her, and he's never wrong. In fact, draining Gilbert's sword may have been intentional, a way to keep them from relying on relics. Convinced, the others follow the plan and continue with the mission. When they reach the wolves' den, they find that all the wolves are armed and wearing armor. Defeating such a large number will be complicated. Gilbert offers to go ahead and try to take out some of the wolves, but Tino reprimands him, saying he would be an easy target before even getting close. As the leader, she feels the weight of bringing everyone back alive. Being agile, she and Ruda will run to draw the wolves' attacks, while Greg and Gilbert attack from behind. Hopefully, the long-range weapons won't be as dangerous up close, but Tino makes it clear that no one will be sacrificed, no matter what. Meanwhile, Craig flies over the forest toward the den, hoping that Tino can survive, even if it means sacrificing the rest of the team. Fortunately, she didn't hear him say that and continues fighting alongside the others to ensure everyone's survival. They've managed to deal with the monsters thanks to cooperation, though the path is far from easy. Their biggest advantage is that the wolves don't know how to fight as a team. With more wolves approaching, Gilbert and Greg feel confident that they can take them down. Tino acknowledges that, for an improvised team, they're doing surprisingly well. She doesn't like Gilbert's attitude, but she has to admit he's a strong fighter, and Greg, with his experience, knows how to coordinate. Ruda, although not a great combatant, makes up for it by handling all the recon, allowing Tino to focus on the battle. She believes that every detail of this team was carefully planned by Craig and starts to pray to him, almost like a god. Gilbert, while fighting a wolf, recalls the last time he spoke with his old group. He had reprimanded them for not being up to the task, and they admitted that they simply couldn't keep up with him. That was when he decided to go solo. He knew his former companions were giving their best, but the gap in strength kept widening, and he couldn't stay with them any longer. Since then, he's hunted alone, but now he realizes how good it is to fight alongside someone. After they defeat the last wolf in the area, the group moves forward until they reach a large opening. They are about to enter when Tino makes them stop, sensing that there is something more inside. The others ask if it could be the hunter they came to rescue, but Tino is certain that the vault boss is ahead. Greg thinks it's too risky to face the boss and suggests retreating, but Tino points out that they got this far without any injuries. A single boss shouldn't be impossible to defeat. She tells Greg that he needs to be a bit more courageous, as always playing it safe won't make him improve. Greg admits that he's grown complacent, thinking he was good enough as a level 4 hunter. Before he even realized it, he started avoiding any sign of danger, his cowardice certainly influenced by the trauma of seeing his friends die due to useless bravery. No one would blame him for wanting a safe life, but the fact that he sought out the First Steps clan shows that he wants to grow, and Craig must have noticed that when he put him on the team. He doubts Craig thought that much before choosing him, but what other explanation could there be? Ruta asks if Craig had any special reason for choosing her too, but Tino can only say that she has great attributes. Meanwhile, Craig flies through the forest, still hoping to find Tino and the others. He expected them to flee from the vault after realizing it was more dangerous than they thought, but he hasn't located them yet and needs to keep searching. Den is now in trouble, with no way to break the wingsuit, and ends up crashing through the tunnels of the Wolves' Denver. Meanwhile, Tino and the others come across the dungeon boss, and it's much bigger than they expected. When the monster makes the first move, the group is forced to split up and run around the room to escape. Even without engaging directly, it's clear that this creature is extremely powerful, and even Tino starts to doubt if they'll be able to defeat it. At that moment, she spots a weak point on the wolf's head and remembers that Craig would never send her on a mission she couldn't complete. She can't give in to fear now. Shouting to Gilbert, she asks him to block one of the wolf's attacks while she handles the rest. Gilbert agrees, and as the wolf approaches, he moves forward to draw its attention. The moment the wolf charges at him, Gilbert blocks with his sword, thinking the monster is vulnerable. Greg takes the opportunity and rushes to cut its leg, but he is thrown away like a rag doll. The others seem to handle the situation better, moving with more agility. Shortly after, Greg gets back up and tries to return to the fight, but his sword is broken in half, and the wolf goes for a fatal strike. Luckily, Ruta manages to pull him out of the way just in time, and the wolf's axe gets stuck in the ground. Tino takes advantage, runs up the weapon, and leaps to strike the wolf's head. Even feeling the pain from the scratch on her leg, she forces herself to continue and drives the blade into the monster's neck, which finally falls defeated. On the ground, Ruta rushes over to check on Tino, as she's badly hurt, but Tino says she'll be fine, a healing potion should do the trick. Greg, on the other hand, is frustrated for having lost his sword, but relieved to still be alive. With the boss finally defeated, the group thinks it's now just a matter of finding the missing hunters and heading back to the city. Tino hands her sword to Greg to use for the time being, but suddenly, a giant arrow flies toward her. She manages to dodge it at the last second, but quickly realizes the battle isn't over. For new bosses appear, all armed and ready to attack. If defeating one of them was already hard, Tino has no idea how to handle 4. She suggests that everyone run to a nearby narrow cave to gain some distance from the wolves. It was a good plan, but the monsters notice their intention, and one of them leaps to block the entrance. With no other options, Greg and Gilbert exchange glances and make the tough decision to stay behind and distract the wolves, giving Tino and Ruta a chance to escape. The two are the fastest, so they have the best chance of surviving. Tino is desperate for a solution and wonders what Craig would do in this situation. Suddenly, she remembers the ring he gave her, and an idea comes to mind. She shouts to the others that no one is sacrificing themselves today. She'll attack the first wolf and wants everyone to cover her. Greg and Gilbert distract the monster, while Ruta throws kunai at its eyes. Seizing the moment when it's blinded, Tino activates the shooting ring, firing a laser beam straight into the wolf's eye, leaving it permanently blind. It's the chance to attack, and Gilbert rushes in for the final blow. But even blind, the wolf senses his approach and hurls him against the wall. Tino runs to see if he's okay, and Gilbert apologizes for getting so hurt. She reassures him, saying he did nothing wrong, it was her plan that failed. With no more ideas, everything seems lost. However, before the wolf can strike again, it is slammed against the wall with impressive force. Craig appears out of nowhere, hitting the perfect spot. He's so confused he doesn't even notice the wolf trying to attack him, but thanks to one of his protective relics, he comes out unscathed. A blow like that would have been fatal, but Craig came prepared, with several protective rings. He points at the wolf and fires all his shooting rings at full power, launching a barrage that drives it away. Everyone is amazed by Craig's power, but he hadn't even planned to attack, it was pure reflex. Unfortunately, the wolf rises again. Craig expected this, as the damage from the shooting rings is low. Surrounded once more, he feels relieved for having brought so many rings, but to get out of there, he'll have to use the forbidden slime. He removes the object from his necklace and throws it in the middle of the wolves, shouting for everyone to run. Tino's leg still hurts, so she can't run at her usual speed. Craig stays behind, apparently protecting the rear, but in reality, it's just because he's slower than the others. As they run, Tino recalls the day she met Craig, when he and his group saved her from being sold into slavery. Since then, Tino has admired Craig and always sought his approval. When they finally reach a safe place, she eagerly waits for a compliment, even though they didn't defeat all the bosses. Before Craig can say anything, Ruta remarks that Tino did a great job leading, even without defeating all the bosses. Craig agrees, pointing out that he had already expected them all to be dead, so the fact that they're alive is a great achievement. Tino is happy with the recognition, but Craig soon notices the wound on her leg and uses a healing relic to treat it. Greg asks if Craig is going to fight the bosses, but he replies that it's not the best choice right now and orders everyone to follow him. He just wants to get out of that place, but has no idea where the exit is. Maybe he's just leading the group in circles. Tino and Ruta are both thieves, so they would really like to do some scouting or something like that. But even so, they have complete faith that Craig knows where he's going, even if he's not sure himself. At this moment, Gilbert speaks up, and after everything he's learned, he's sure that the great Craig knows what he's doing, but to him, it seems like they're just wandering aimlessly. He asks if Craig is leading them to the exit, but before Craig can respond, Tino interjects, saying that path does not lead to the exit. She has a vague idea of how the lair is laid out, having seen a map, so she knows they're heading in the opposite direction. But, by the looks of it, Craig has his reasons for that. Ruta also trusts him completely, but would at least like him to tell them where they're going. However, he remains silent, a mystery. Eventually, they reach a fork in the path, and Craig picks a direction at random. As he turns, everyone is shocked because Craig has just led them to the wounded hunters they were sent to rescue. Of course, Craig still has no idea what he's doing, but since everyone seems to be heading in the other direction, he follows them. Seeing the wounded hunters being tended to, he is surprised that Tino noticed them because he certainly wouldn't have. The leader of the wounded group is named Dave, and he thanks Tino for rescuing them. But Tino says that he should really thank Craig because they never would have gotten there without him. Craig tries to say that he just guessed the direction to go and doesn't deserve any praise, but no one believes that for a second. They think he's just being modest. Ruta gives some potions to the wounded hunters to help them recover, but they are still losing a lot of energy since they haven't eaten in a long time. At that moment, Craig thinks of the perfect solution. He brought a magic bag that has an almost infinite amount of chocolate inside. Of course, the only thing the bag can store is chocolate, so it's pretty useless outside of this specific situation. He tells Dave that he's glad he's okay because when he heard that a level 5 group had disappeared in this dungeon, he was worried that something terrible had happened. Dave says that they barely managed to survive, and Gilbert finds it hard to believe because, although wolves can be strong, there is no way a level 5 group could be overwhelmed by monsters of that level. But Dave wasn't talking about the wolves, he was referring to a small phantom covered in bones that devastated the group on its own. Whatever it is, it's the pure embodiment of malice. It has total control over the vault, so it's probably the Silver Moon curse that resides there. It represents the resentment and hatred of all the monsters that have been killed, and because of the vault, it has grown in strength to become an absolute monster. Dave and the rest of the group are considered elite in terms of strength, but even so, they were all completely powerless against this creature. So much so that Dave would consider it a rival to Thousand Swords, a member of the Grieving Souls. Thousand Swords is widely considered the strongest swordsman in the capital, having studied all the orthodox sword techniques and used them to learn even more. He is an unfathomable prodigy who can take down dozens of enemies, all with a wooden sword. Luke is not someone to be underestimated, so Craig finds it an exaggeration to say that a phantom is as strong as him. After all, if such a phantom really existed, Luke would have hunted it down long ago. But given that the phantom completely destroyed a level 5 group, Craig doesn't believe that Tino and her group can defeat it. That's why Craig really wishes he had left this job to Ark, so he wouldn't have to deal with it. Dave continues, saying that the monster was basically toying with their lives and didn't kill them immediately the last time they fought. But if they encounter it again, it will certainly finish them off. Ruda turns to Craig and asks what they should do, but Craig is internally freaking out because he wasn't prepared to deal with this. He stares blankly for a while before having an idea and tells Ruda that they need to prioritize the safety of the wounded. They must leave the vault before doing anything else. Additionally, since this mission was originally Tino's, he says she is now in charge. Tino doesn't feel she deserves the role of leader with someone as great as Craig present, but Craig insists that she take over, as he doesn't want to. Tino eventually agrees to act as leader again and agrees with Craig's suggestion to exit the vault, so she will guide everyone back to the exit. They should be able to get there much faster now that C has fully healed her leg, but Craig reminds her that there are still injured people in the group, so she shouldn't run too fast for everyone to keep up. He says this for his own benefit, because, let's be honest, there's no way he can keep up with Tino's full speed, especially now that he's so out of shape. After traversing the vault for a while, Tino warns everyone that they are approaching the exit and that, so far, they've been lucky since they haven't encountered the deadly phantom. But if that thing appears, Dave promises to act as a shield for everyone, buying time for them to escape. Teo reassures him, saying that won't be necessary, as long as Craig is with them, she is sure they will all get out alive. But, in reality, Craig isn't so confident. He is seriously considering grabbing Tino and abandoning the rest if the monster shows up, but for now, he decides to keep up a cheerful facade. He still has 5 safety rings, so he can at least survive for a while if he has to fight, but he doesn't have any useful relics with him. The shooting rings don't work, and he dropped the only relic sword he had while flying here, so it's hard to be optimistic. At that moment, everyone senses something approaching and quickly prepares for battle. Craig and the others stand in front of Tino, ready to keep her safe. Craig doesn't have any attack relics, but he's willing to use his body as a human missile with the wingsuit if necessary. The atmosphere in the cave changes as the phantom approaches. Everyone is terrified, realizing they don't stand a chance against it. But Tino sees something even more terrifying appearing behind the monster, and a feeling of impending doom washes over her, causing her to plead with Craig for help. Craig seems to recognize who the second figure is, but he is more confused than scared, not understanding what she's doing there. Then, the second figure moves quickly and takes down the phantom with a powerful kick. After that display of strength, there is no doubt in Craig's mind that it's Liz. She approaches Craig and asks, just to be sure, if it was okay for her to kick that thing against the wall because she really doesn't know what's going on here. Craig replies that there's nothing to worry about, and she feels relieved to hear that. Finally finding Craig, she reveals that she found one of his relic swords on the ground while coming here. Ruda and Greg immediately recognize who Liz is, but Dave has never heard of her, so Liz gets angry, not believing there are hunters who don't know the grieving souls. She was already having a bad day before arriving, because she rushed home just to see Craig, and then found out he had gone to that vault. At first, she thought Craig was worrying too much since she was sure Tino could handle the mission on her own. So, imagine how disappointed she feels to find out that Tino couldn't handle such a simple vault. Gilbert tries to defend Tino, explaining that she did nothing wrong, but Liz doesn't want to hear it and kicks him against the wall, nearly killing him with that blow. Now that there are no more distractions, she goes back to yelling at Tino, calling her weak and incompetent, especially after all the training she's been through. Tino starts begging for forgiveness, and Craig feels sorry for her, thinking that Liz is being too harsh. While Liz is still yelling at Tino, the Phantom recovers from the kick, and both Greg and Ruda start pouring healing potions on Gilbert to keep him alive. Craig doesn't want Tino to take another hit, so he tries to calm Liz down, saying that she shouldn't be angry with Tino. He sent her here to rescue some hunters, and she fulfilled her mission, so it's not fair to call her incompetent after everything she did. As soon as Liz hears Craig say that, all her anger disappears, and she asks Craig if Tino really did a good job. Craig assures her that Tino impressed him, and while he's talking about impressive people, he congratulates Liz on finally learning to control her attacks. Liz beams with pride at the praise, though she still doesn't understand why she should make some of her attacks weaker. But since Craig always insisted on it, she learned to tone down her blows. Craig is glad she took his advice, but she may need to work on it a bit more, since Gilbert is in critical condition because of her warning strike. Tino once again apologizes for all the trouble she caused, but Liz is no longer angry about it. She tells Tino that she has good talent, but she's going to need to work much harder to make up for her lack of strength. Now, the Phantom has joined one of the wolf bosses and is preparing to attack the group again. While everyone else is terrified, Liz is just annoyed because the monster had the audacity to pull out a machine gun as if it was going to do something. She grabs her mask, and as the wolf starts shooting at her, she just stands still, as the bullets are moving too slowly to really be a threat. When the gun runs out of ammo, Liz is still unharmed, and not only does she have some of the bullets in her hand, but she also had time to create a pattern with the rest of the bullets she caught. She had calmed her anger earlier, but after learning that Tino was losing to an armed monster, she is even angrier than before. Liz had been dodging bullets since she was 10, so it's an insult to her strength that a monster would point a gun at her and think it would work. Determined to show how easy it is to defeat a phantom like that, she does a somersault in the air, and as she comes down, she kicks straight through the huge wolf, splitting it in half and causing it to explode. That was nothing difficult, and she doesn't understand why Tino didn't do the same to defeat the wolf long ago. As she speaks, the phantom draws its sword and charges toward Liz. But, just like in the first encounter, Liz thinks it should have been easy for Tino to deal with something so weak. After grabbing its sword with 2 fingers, she flings it into the air and begins delivering consecutive punches, freeing Tino for being too weak to do it herself. Tino bursts into tears, and Craig feels bad for her, but this is a common occurrence with Liz as a trainer. Liz is the fastest hunter in the world, and her incredible speed has earned her the nickname Silent Shadow. When it's all over, Tino, Greg, Ruda, and Gilbert find themselves at the guild, and Gilbert informs everyone that he wants to give Craig his fire sword because he realized he was relying too much on it. He intends to train his body from scratch until he's capable of catching bullets like Liz. None of the others think he'll be able to do it, but if he's serious about wanting to be like Liz, Tino thinks he should know something about the masks they use. Everyone believes Craig did this intentionally to conceal the group's intentions, but actually, when he ordered the masks for the grieving souls 6 years ago, he forgot to make holes for the eyes. So, everyone in the group basically fights blind all the time. Now that they have avoided a crisis, it's good to remember the Shatorai slime, the one Craig used as a distraction. This slime is not just anything, it was created by the world's greatest alchemist, Shatorai Smart, who is an old friend of Craig. In one of her bold experiments, Shatorai ended up creating this peculiar slime. Thinking it would be safer, she entrusted it to Craig, who accepted the vial without issue, believing it was just an innocuous liquid. But when he tried to open it, Shatorai immediately stopped him, warning that it could destroy the capital. Despite the warning, Craig ended up releasing the slime. He still refuses to believe it and hopes the slime will magically appear in his room, but to no avail. He then sits on the bed, trying to think logically. Remembering the moment in the White Wolf Den when he opened the vial and saw nothing inside, he concludes that the container was empty the whole time. Or at least, that's what he tries to believe. Meanwhile, at the White Wolf Den, the association has sent an investigation team to check out the strange events. Craig, so worried about the disappearance of the slime, hardly slept. As he walks down the hallway, he encounters Eva, who informs him that GAR wants a detailed report on what happened at the den. Craig, with no desire to deal with it, asks if Tino could do the report since she was technically the mission leader. Eva would like to ask the same, but Tino is busy training with Liz. Changing the subject, Craig asks if Eva has heard any strange news in the capital, but she assures him that everything is calm. He relaxes a bit, but Eva, noticing Craig's nervousness, promises to investigate anything suspicious in the capital. Desperate for her not to discover the slime, Craig tries to change the subject and decides to head to the training hall to see Tino. Eva watches Craig leave, recalling how he always seems lazy but has an uncanny ability to foresee disasters and anomalies with very little information. At first, she thought it was pure luck, but after so many accurate predictions, she learned to trust him completely. If Craig is worried about the capital, then she stays alert. Arriving at the training hall, Craig finds a group of hunters waiting outside. The leader, Sven, pleads with him to interrupt Liz, as no one has been able to train with her inside. Liz, in her battle mode, is too intimidating. While Craig understands, he hesitates, knowing that interrupting Liz could be dangerous. But when he opens the door, he sees Tino on the ground, exhausted, and Liz about to deliver a final blow, complaining about her weakness. Craig intervenes, suggesting that Tino has already reached her limit for today. Liz, however, suspects that Craig wants her to go easy on Tino and even teases him, asking if he intends to stop her. He confirms this, and she reluctantly agrees, but before he can pull her away, Tino crawls up, insisting on continuing. With no other option, Craig locks the door to the hall and informs the others that the space will be off limits for today. Sven, resigned, suggests that at least Tino will come out of this training stronger. However, before Craig leaves, Sven mentions a ghost invasion on the northern route, with a group from the Order of Knights already defeated. Craig recalls reports of recent attacks near the den and realizes this may be connected to Gar's request for a meeting. Not wanting to take responsibility, he merely wishes Ark were around to handle the situation. Ark, being the reliable leader he is, would surely manage it. Until then, Craig plans to delay his involvement as much as possible, casually suggesting that Sven go to Gar's office and take the mission in his place. Craig bids farewell, leaving Sven confused and impressed by Craig's apparent calmness, unaware that he just wants to avoid the task. The newest subordinate in the clan doesn't understand why Craig is so respected. To him, Craig seems like the type of leader who just sits back and lets others do all the work. Sven, a veteran in the clan, smiles and replies that Craig has always been like that, but that doesn't mean he's inactive. Behind the scenes, Craig works to keep everything running smoothly. He warns the newbie, never underestimate Craig. When it's necessary, he becomes a real monster. Meanwhile, in Gar's office, a new report comes in. The ley lines near the White Wolf Den have not changed, but there are still no answers to explain the strange events occurring in the area. Gar is convinced that Craig knows more than he lets on, especially since he rarely goes to the vaults, but recently announced that he would check in on the vault. Determined not to let Craig evade questions, Gar intends to pay him a personal visit. Unaware of all this, Craig has no idea what is to come. But what no one knows is that something big is indeed happening in the vault. The Akashic Tower has been conducting secret experiments there, drawing on the immense power of the ley lines. The ambitious goal is to create treasure vaults at will, if the Great Mage's theory is correct. However, the risk of being discovered by the association is growing, and the Great Mage is tense. His followers question why Sophie Black, responsible for defense, is not on site, but the Great Mage assures them that she is already on her way to ensure that the association's investigation does not compromise the operation. Meanwhile, Craig is having a terrifying nightmare about Shatori's slime causing a disaster. Upon waking, gasping for breath, he can't control the panic, remembering that he still has no idea of the true destructive potential of that slime. The noise wakes Liz, who, surprised, is in bed next to him, but Craig, already used to her sneakiness, just tries to relax. Liz asks if he is busy today, and Craig, still under the effect of the nightmare, sees her invitation as a chance to clear his head. GAR, on the other hand, arrives looking for Craig, determined to finally confront him. The receptionist is surprised by his in-person visit, but he knows this is the only way to avoid being ignored again. As Craig and Liz come down the stairs, Liz spots GAR and, irritated, realizes he is about to interrupt her meeting with Craig. Without much ceremony, she confronts him and, in an acid tone, accuses him of always relying on Craig for everything. GAR, holding onto his patience, tries to remain polite and asks about the report from the Night Palace vault, but Liz ignores him, seizing the opportunity to insult him. When she finally kicks him, GAR loses his patience and decides to show that he is not a fool either. Craig, for his part, does not want to be part of this mess, so he casually pulls Gar's assistant aside and asks if she would prefer to discuss the reconnaissance results. She informs him that the ley lines are normal, which is a relief for Craig, but he soon realizes that there is a more urgent problem at hand. When the assistant presses him on what he meant by another problem, Craig avoids mentioning the destructive slime and makes up an excuse. He says the details are confidential. To throw her off completely, he suggests that Ark take over the investigation since he himself, of course, could never handle such an important mission alone. Meanwhile, GAR and Liz are still exchanging blows downstairs. GAR, much stronger, cannot keep up with Liz's speed, who moves like lightning and constantly taunts him, laughing at how rusty he is after being buried in paperwork for so long. This taunting only makes him more determined. He prepares to give it his all, willing to show that his Class 1 Hunter Strength, Level 7, still lives up to the title despite his retirement. But before the fight gets even more serious, Craig intervenes, ordering them both to stop before they destroy the place. GAR, still irritated, steps back, but Liz drops the fight and approaches Craig, already forgetting the argument. As they walk together, Liz comments that GAR has really let his physical shape slip. Craig thinks it's unfair to call the colleague weak. After all, Liz still trains actively while GAR carries the weight of clan administration. But Liz insists that, in his current state, he would never survive the Night Parade vault. Intrigued, Craig asks if the monsters in that vault are really that strong. The other Grievers are still in the Night Parade vault, but Craig can hardly wait for their return, especially now, with the dilemma of Shatori's slime on his mind. At that moment, Liz hands him her bag and suddenly runs toward a man standing in the street, watching them. Confused, Craig asks what she is doing, and Liz explains that the guy seemed suspicious. Craig, surprised, doesn't see this as sufficient reason to attack someone and asks her to let him go. He turns to the man and asks if everything is okay, but instead of answering, the guy quickly runs away, which only intrigues Craig more. Liz, in turn, does not understand why Craig let him escape, but then convinces herself that he must have a plan and apologizes for acting impulsively. Meanwhile, the man reaches a secluded shop. He is a member of the Akashic Tower and had been following Craig and Liz from a distance, convinced that no one had noticed him. But after being confronted and then released, he comes to believe that Craig knows more about the tower's operations than he appears to. The next day, Liz can hardly contain her excitement for another date with Craig. However, he reminds her that they aren't here for fun this time. They're in one of the most dangerous areas of the Imperial capital. Craig brought Liz here because he's after something important. According to information Eva obtained, this area has been the scene of frequent disappearances. While these could just be the result of the usual violence and kidnappings, Craig fears these incidents might be connected to Shore's slime, which would make him responsible, even if indirectly, for these tragedies. Additionally, AA's report mentions a new ice cream shop just ahead, and with a slight smile, Craig suggests they stop by. Liz, of course, is more than happy to join. As they approach the ice cream shop, a mysterious man watches them, paralyzed with fear. No one was supposed to be able to find that shop, which is actually a research base for the Akashic Tower. How did Craig manage to discover it? Heart racing, the man decides to close the shop before they notice anything suspicious. But before he can, Sophia enters the room, just back from her mission, and notices his panic. Curious, she asks what happened. A few minutes later, Craig and Liz arrive at the shop, only to find it locked. Liz is furious. Her chance to have ice cream with Craig vanished before her eyes. And, as usual, she tries to solve the problem directly. She threatens to break down the door. Inside, the Akashic Tower member can only hope she gives up. Before things get out of hand, Craig intervenes, suggesting that maybe the place just ran out of ice cream. Reluctantly, Liz agrees and drops the idea. Back at the clan office, Liz is still disappointed about missing her moment with Craig, while he, lost in thought, ponders the presence of Shore's slime in the city and the urgency of dealing with it. He turns to Liz and asks when Shatorai is expected back from the Night Palace vault, as there's something specific he needs to discuss with her. Since Shatorai won't return anytime soon, Liz offers to help however she can. Craig explains that he needs information on a specific magical creature, a subject Liz knows well. At that moment, Ava enters with a determined expression, bringing a list of candidates to join the investigation of the White Wolf Den. Stan and the other members of the Obsidian Cross are already on site, but Ark, essential to the mission, is absent. Ava expects Craig to approve the list, but he, absorbed in his thoughts, just signals her to handle it herself. He trusts her judgment, leaving the responsibility in her hands. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, the Akashic Tower is in turmoil. The members gather to discuss how Craig managed to locate their secret base, cleverly disguised as an ice cream shop. Craig's calmness in pretending to believe it was just a simple store suggests he's far ahead of them, and this causes panic and uncertainty among the members. The leader finally turns to Sophia for a solution. With a cold smile, she proposes something drastic: declare war on Craig's clan. The other members of Akashic are incredulous. Does she really think they can defeat the first step? Sophia states, without hesitation, that the Akashic Tower is the seeker of truth and should never retreat, even against an elite hunting group. This is the perfect opportunity to test their new defense. If they can eliminate Craig's group, there will be no one left to threaten them. Convinced by Sophia's boldness, the leader seriously considers her proposal, knowing that if they have indeed been discovered, they have no choice but to fight. Craig realizes they won't get out of this without facing a battle. He looks at Sophia and tells her she's free to do as she wishes. Sophia lights up at this, knowing she'll finally get to enjoy herself. Meanwhile, Tino has just recovered from a near-death experience during training with Liz. She knows Liz wasn't actually trying to kill her, but it was close. Determined to celebrate her recovery, Tino goes out for a stroll around the city. On her way, she notices several carriages parked and, stranger still, the clan hall crowded with hunters. Curious, she approaches one of them and asks what's happening. Swa explains that the association organized a large joint effort to investigate the White Wolf Denver. But even knowing this, Tino thinks it's excessive to have so many people involved. The hunter explains that Craig wanted to send Ark, and all these people are there to fill his absence. Ark is one of the world's strongest level 7 hunters, so without him, they need a large team to compensate. A little later, Ava brings Craig to greet the hunters, but he's completely baffled about why they're all there. Ava informs him of the situation and explains that since Ark isn't there to lead the mission, she took the liberty of gathering a team large enough to make up for his strength. Craig recalls trying to pass the mission to Ark, simply because he trusts him, but he never imagined Eva would bring so many people to replace him. On top of that, he's not even sure if he'll have enough money to pay them all. So, he suggests splitting the group in half. The hunters panic, believing they wouldn't survive an arc-level threat with only half the team. Confused by the commotion, Craig asks Ava if there's money to pay everyone's reward, and she reassures him, explaining that Gar has already requested extra funds from the association. Even so, Craig still feels uneasy about sending so many people into the vault, knowing that Shore's slime might be down there. But he's not about to explain himself, so he agrees to let them go, and if anything goes wrong, he'll play dumb. At that moment, Liz shows up and starts mocking the hunters, saying that if it were her, she'd go alone. In fact, she offers to take on the mission herself, but Craig immediately refuses. He already knows that if he gives Liz the mission, she'll drag Tino along, and he doesn't want Tino to go through that. Besides, Liz never works well in a group, so she'd probably end up causing problems for the others. Craig makes it clear that everyone there, except for Liz, will handle the mission. Eva asks if that means he's going too, and the hunters, overhearing the conversation, get excited since, if the Level 8 clan leader accompanies them, the mission would be much easier. But Craig really doesn't want to go, and with everyone insisting, he agrees but makes up an excuse about urgent business and puts Sven in charge until he arrives later. Of course, he has no intention of showing up until the mission is almost finished. Meanwhile, in the White Wolf Den, Sven and the rest of the Obsidian Cross are frustrated with how easy the vault is. The average monster strength has increased, but it's still manageable, so they don't understand why they were sent there. Back at the association, everyone is preparing to depart, and Liz is still begging Craig to let her come along. He stays firm in his decision, though he knows she'll likely go anyway if left alone. So, he tells her he has a special mission for her, which finally calms her down a bit. Before they leave, the temporary captain approaches Craig and asks if he has any advice. Craig thinks for a moment and recommends that if they encounter a slime-like creature, they should treat it with extreme caution. The captain thinks it's unlikely they'll encounter one in the White Wolf Den, but promises to be careful. At the Akashic Tower base, Megas is furious upon learning that the association is coming after him with so many people, but if they want to stop his research with monomike material, he'll do whatever it takes to crush them. The tower members are apprehensive, knowing their enemies have the souls in mourning on their side, but Sophia reassures them, saying their defense system was designed to repel attacks like this. Besides, there are only 3 souls in mourning in the capital: Craig, Liz, and Shatorai. Liz can be neutralized with countermeasures against physical attacks, and Craig, being the strategist, won't use his full potential without his allies. The only real threat is Shatorai. Sophia has already ensured that Shore's alchemy won't work against them, but she holds a personal grudge against Shatorai and is determined to defeat her. She explains to Megas that Shatorai has been investigating her research ever since she found her thesis, something Sophia won't forgive. So, she asks for permission to use all resources against Shatorai. Megas agrees, saying that Flick and the others should follow her orders, which annoys Flick, but he obeys for the mission's sake. Elsewhere in the White Wolf Den, Sven's team begins to think this mission wasn't worth it, as they haven't found anything unusual and don't understand Craig's judgment. But Sven believes he had a good reason for sending them. At that moment, he receives Craig's message about the slime and takes it seriously, asking Hemrick to sound the emergency whistle. All the hunters in the vault hear it and exit immediately, but are annoyed to find out the reason was a random slime. They think it's absurd that Sven blindly follows all of Craig's instructions, but Sven knows Craig has good reasons for his confidence. He doesn't know what danger the slime poses, but thinks it's safer to wait for reinforcements before continuing the investigation. The other hunters still think it's an overreaction, but Sven recalls a previous occasion when Craig invited him to a flower-watching party and asked him to bring weapons for no apparent reason. When the party began, a vault appeared right there, and that vault became known as the Prism Garden. Since then, Sven is convinced that Craig can see the future and follows his every word. In Craig's office, Liz is pestering him, curious about the special mission he made up for her. But in truth, he has nothing and just wanted to keep her there. At that moment, they hear someone at Craig's door, and it's Shatorai, who just returned. She wasn't supposed to come back so soon, but she had a feeling that a powerful organization is about to take action, so she came to offer help. Shitori's slime was originally created to enhance a slime's ability to adapt to its environment. However, the experiment went horribly wrong, resulting in something dangerous. Shitori is convinced that Craig knows the slime escaped, but assures that it was designed never to attack her or Craig, although everyone else is a potential target. Still, one question troubles her: how exactly did the slime manage to escape Craig's vault? After investigating, Shitori comes to an unexpected and frustrating conclusion. The slime likely learned how to open the vault on its own while Craig was away and escaped through the bathroom drain. Craig, on the other hand, is internally terrified. Shitori has just confirmed that the slime has the potential to destroy the entire capital while it's on the loose. Nevertheless, she remains resolute, promising to handle the situation. But before she leaves, she warns Craig that there is another important matter they need to discuss. Meanwhile, reinforcements arrive at the White Wolf Den, where Sven is informed that Craig wants him to take command of the group. The news isn't what Sven was hoping for. He feels frustrated that Craig didn't show up in person, but soon learns that Craig has taken Liz and Tino on a separate mission. In the end, he decides this might be a blessing in disguise. At least he won't have to deal with Liz. He quickly gathers the group for a strategic meeting, bringing up Sig's warning and asking if anyone has faced a slime directly or brought anything useful to handle one. The hunters, however, aren't too concerned. To them, slimes are typically harmless creatures. Most of them have only brought their usual gear, with no special preparation. One hunter at the back mentions bringing a slime repellent, but no one seems to take the threat seriously. After all, how could they? Slimes are harmless, they say. However, Craig had already warned them that this is no ordinary slime. Gain, visibly impatient, starts mocking the situation. To him, fearing a single slime is ridiculous, and he tries to convince the group to abandon the mission. However, the other hunters don't take kindly to his attitude, casting him suspicious looks. Everyone knows how this kind of recklessness ends. Those who underestimate the danger are usually the first to die. Sven has no patience for arguments. He's done his part by warning the group. If Gain wants to play the hero and end up as a name in next week's obituary, so be it. Without support, Gain retreats to the back, visibly irritated. At that moment, Talia Whitman, an alchemist who once worked with Shitori in the clan's laboratory, speaks up. In a serious tone, she reveals that she and Shitori developed a special drug to eliminate slimes, with a 99% success rate. This revelation shifts the mood among the hunters, and Sven decides the best course of action is to proceed with caution. He emphasizes the importance of prioritizing safety and sharing information. After an entire day spent exploring the vault, the results are disappointing. There's no sign of the slime, just the wolf knights on patrol. Some begin to question if Craig was wrong this time, but Sven remains steadfast. He still trusts Craig's judgment. Gain, on the other hand, returns from the vault with a smug grin, taking the opportunity to mock Sven for his blind faith in Craig. While Sven understands Gain's frustrations, he doesn't want to hear more complaints until the mission is over. Gain walks off, ignoring Sven's warning not to go off alone. And, if you've ever seen a horror movie, you know what happens next. Gain, as stubborn as ever. While walking alone in the forest, Gain hears a distant wolf howl. He had already broken a cardinal rule of horror movies by leaving the group, and he seems determined to make every possible mistake. Ignoring the whistle that could summon reinforcements, he heads toward the sound. Curiosity quickly turns to unease when he finds a giant wolf knight chained to the ground. Beside the creature, two members of the Akashic Tower hold a suspicious-looking syringe. Complaining about Sophia, clearly annoyed that she's Magus's favorite despite not being able to use magic like them, they prepare to inject the wolf with the syringe's contents. Gain doesn't wait to see what will happen. With his impressive strength, he charges forward and quickly defeats one of the mages, who clearly hasn't trained outside of a library. The other, more skilled, responds by casting fire magic. Although Gain manages to block the attack with his shield, the heat sears his arm, leaving painful burns. Despite his injuries, Gain grabs the first mage again and knocks him out with a powerful punch. When the mage, in disbelief, asks if Craig sent him, Gain responds coldly, "Craig's not here." When the mage, in disbelief, asks if Craig sent him, Gain responds coldly, "Craig isn't here." The second mage, hearing this, smirks with confidence. While Gain focuses on the fight, the mage injects the Wolf Knight with the suspicious substance. Within seconds, the creature begins to dissolve, its body twisting grotesquely. The mages explain that the wolf is being forcibly demonized and will attack anyone with a high mana concentration. Unfortunately, the highest source of mana in the area is Gain. When the wolf transforms into an amorphous, slime-like creature, Gain finally understands the danger. He uses his whistle to call for reinforcements, retreating while trying to avoid the creature's attacks. Back at the camp, the sound of the whistle echoes in the distance, prompting Sven to order the group to prepare. He leads the hunters toward the forest, unsure of what awaits them. When Gain emerges, running out of the vegetation, he warns that Craig was right about the slime and that it's coming. Moments later, the wolf slime bursts out of the forest, a grotesque and imposing sight. Talia, observing the creature, is shocked. She has never seen anything like it. Sven calls for calm and organizes a distraction while trying to figure out how to handle the situation. The first attempts at attacking the creature fail miserably. Arrows have no effect, and spells seem to be absorbed by the monster. Despite this, Sven orders Henrik to tend to Gain's burns while listening to his account of the mages and the Wolf Knight's transformation. Realizing that conventional approaches are useless, Sven asks Talia for the anti-slime drug. She explains that the substance should destroy the slime upon direct contact. Sven lures the creature, throws the vial on the ground, and fires an arrow to shatter it. However, the monster simply regenerates, confirming that it is no ordinary slime, but something far more complex. At that moment, Shatorai arrives at the scene. Without hesitation, she explains that the monster is surrounded by a protective magical energy that neutralizes both physical and magical attacks. Surprised, Sven asks why she is there. Shatorai responds that Craig anticipated things might get complicated and sent her to help. With impressive composure, Shatorai retrieves a metal anti-mana vial from her bag. She throws it at the creature, and Sven fires another arrow to activate it. An explosion occurs, destroying the monster's head. Its body begins to disintegrate slowly as the group watches in relief. However, before they can relax, Gar shows up late, visibly frustrated for having missed all the action. Shatorai uses the brief calm to inform the group that the Akashic Tower is behind these events, led by Magus, a mage who was banished long ago. She suspects the existence of an underground base nearby and warns that more creatures like the wolf slime could be on the way. Although she only brought one metal anti-mana vial, Shatorai believes she can develop a more effective weapon if she can analyze the monster's remains. Sven organizes the group to protect her while she works, while Liz tries to convince Craig to let her assist. Craig, however, refuses, confident that Shatorai can handle the situation. Flick receives the news that Sophia had ordered the mutant monsters to be sent out one at a time. To him, this is not only absurd, it's an invitation for disaster. Such a strategy would only make it easier for the ghosts to defeat the monsters. Furious, he demands that she be contacted immediately to explain this stupid decision. However, Sophia is inspecting the defense system and simply doesn't respond. Sophia's authority comes directly from Magus, and her instructions are to be followed without question. But Flick knows this battle is the Akashic Tower's last stand against the Association. There is no room for error, and he refuses to let nonsensical orders jeopardize everything. He decides to completely ignore Sophia and sends all the monsters out at once. After all, what's the worst that could happen? Meanwhile, at the Association's camp, Shatorai attempts to interrogate the two captured prisoners. She starts diplomatically, asking them to reveal the location of the Akashic Tower's leader to make things easier. However, the prisoners, firm in their loyalty, refuse to cooperate. Anticipating this, Shitorai brought a special potion to persuade them to talk. As she prepares to force them to drink, association officials intervene, horrified. They recognize the potion as a mind control substance banned years ago. The formula interferes with consciousness, erases memories, and can turn someone into an obedient slave. Mere possession of it is considered a war crime. Gar steps in, saying he understands Shitori's urgency but insists the association cannot resort to dishonorable methods. War crimes are not an option. Shitori apologizes, claiming it was all a misunderstanding. To avoid further problems, she makes a shocking decision. She drinks the potion to destroy the evidence. Everyone is stunned, but Shitori explains that she is nearly immune to potion effects and will be fine. Her focus now shifts to the real problem. The enemy is on the move. A massive slime monster approaches, and Sven asks how to deal with it. Shitori quickly analyzes the situation, explaining that the monster likely has multiple magical barriers. They need to identify which element can break through. She organizes the hunters with shields at the front line, instructing them to drop their equipment the moment the monster makes contact to avoid fatal losses. Elle follows her orders, but when the monster touches his shield, the force is devastating. The impact throws him across the field, tearing off a significant part of his arm. Shitori reacts swiftly, ordering the mages to slow the monster with magical attacks. However, fireballs are deflected, and she soon realizes that the monster's force field is rotational, repelling anything it touches. This completely rules out melee attacks, making even Gar, with his legendary strength, useless in the situation. Gar suggests retreating and waiting for the monster to deplete its mana, but Shitori dismisses the idea. She explains that the creature has enough mana to wreak havoc for over an hour. The only option is to concentrate a powerful enough attack to pierce the barrier, but none of the mages present have that kind of strength. To make matters worse, another slime monster emerges, heightening the panic among the association members, who know they can't handle two at once. Shitori, however, observes with a faint smile. The Akashic Tower must be full of complete idiots, she remarks. Suddenly, the red monster ignores the hunters and turns toward the blue monster. To everyone's surprise, the two creatures begin fighting each other. Gar watches the monster battle with a mix of confusion and frustration. What the hell is going on? He asks. Shitori, ever composed, explains calmly, as if she had anticipated this all along. The monsters only attack hunters to replenish their depleting mana reserves. They absorb the hunter's mana material as fuel. But, when faced with another monster made entirely of mana, they instinctively attack their rival. That's why sending all the slime monsters at once was an incredibly stupid decision. As the monsters battle each other, back at the Akashic Tower, Magus gathers the members to discuss the mistakes that led to this fiasco. He reminds them that Sophia's orders were to be followed without question, but Flick acted on his own, wasting all the slime mutation potions. Sophia is visibly furious. "Did you really think you had a better idea than mine?" she says with biting coldness. "Your limited intelligence shouldn't even allow such a thought." Flick, seething, holds back because, deep down, he knows she's right. Magus, attempting to calm the situation, decides to forgive Flick for his incompetence. "Fortunately, the slimes weren't our only weapon," he says. "But the situation has become more complicated. Any suggestions, Sophia?" She takes a deep breath, reorganizing her thoughts. "Now we have two problems. Shitori is on the battlefield, and so is Gar, a former level 7 hunter. Even in retirement, he's still a legendary hero. With the slimes wasted thanks to a certain idiot, winning will be much harder. And, worse yet, two of ours have been captured. It's only a matter of time before Shitori makes them talk." Flick tries to defend the loyalty of the captives. They would never betray the tower. But Sophia is pragmatic, loyal? Maybe. Smart? Not so much. Shitori has methods that don't need to break the rules to work. Sooner or later, she'll figure out where we are. Our only option now is to act first. She suggests releasing the Malice Devourers, creatures partially trained to attack hunters and force the survivors into a trap. Magus agrees, but warns that they'll need a commander on the battlefield to lead the creatures. Sophia looks directly at Flick. "You need to make up for your screw-up," she declares. Despite his wounded pride, Flick agrees, vowing not to repeat his mistakes. At the association's camp, Talia reflects on Shirtori. She always finds the truth, she thinks, admiring the leader's brilliance. But that talent also stirs a subtle fear and a gnawing envy. Talia knows she'll never reach that level. Lost in these thoughts, she bumps into Sven, who tries to reassure her about the failure of the anti-slime potion. "There was no way to know it was an artificial slime," he says. Still, the unrelenting gaze of the prisoners on Talia unsettles her, though Sven playfully blames it on her vibrant red hair. Later, Gar finds Shirtori still working, entirely engrossed. He tries to convince her to rest, saying they can always return to finish the job later. But Shirtori interrupts him, a slight smile of triumph appearing on her face. "That won't be necessary. I've already located the base." She calls a meeting and presents her deduction. Based on the mana lines and the locations where the slimes appeared, the Akashic Tower's base is hidden in the cliffs. The prisoners react nervously, unintentionally confirming her theory. Shirtori, wasting no time, proposes an immediate attack before they have the chance to evaluate. The prisoners panic, shouting for Sophia to stop the hunters' advance. At the mention of the name, the association members react with intrigue. Shirtori, however, is livid. "Sophia is my arch-nemesis. A brilliant alchemist who has escaped me far too many times. This time, I'll make sure she's brought to justice." With the location confirmed, Shirtori devises a plan. She entrusts Gar with leading the offensive, relying on him to clear the path to the cavern. In another part of the forest, Craig, Liz, and Tino are walking toward the White Wolf's cave. It seems Liz has finally convinced him to get involved. She insists he hurry so they can help before Shirtori is killed. However, Craig doesn't think he needs to worry about Shirtori. In fact, he's more concerned about his own life, as he didn't have time to bring most of his artifacts and is completely without protective rings, meaning he'll die if he's hit even once. Tino warns that they are approaching the White Wolf's cave, but it's so dark that Craig can barely see anything and has no idea where they are. Tino tries to take the opportunity to hold Craig's hand, but Liz absolutely refuses to let anyone other than herself touch Craig. Meanwhile, with the investigation team, Shirtori informs Gain that Craig said he couldn't come to help. Gain is a little disappointed, as he was hoping to meet him now that he understands how amazing Craig really is. Shirtori comments that Craig is practically the best hunter in the world and wouldn't be surprised if he managed to reach level 10 someday. Suddenly, a thunderous roar is heard, followed by a lightning bolt heading straight toward Shirtori and the rest of the group. The one responsible is Flick, who is very proud of himself for taking down all the hunters. So much so that he descends from his elevated position to gloat over the incapacitated bodies of the hunters. However, this decision was extremely reckless, as Shirtori was completely unharmed by the attack. She didn't believe someone from the Akashic Tower would be foolish enough to use an area spell when they had hostages, but it seems she was wrong. Flick can't believe she's still standing after being hit by his thunder attack. However, Shirtori is used to dealing with spells of this level during her hunts with the Grieving Souls, so she always carries countermeasures. She also has a healing weapon for this reason. Using it, she heals Sven, who, upon recovering, charges straight at Flick. It doesn't take long for him to bring Flick down, but the Malice Eater proves to be much more resilient. Sven ends up getting knocked down, but before the monster can kill him, Gar intervenes and defeats it with a single blow. When this news reaches Magus, he becomes angrier than ever, as Sophia had ordered Flick to attack using all the Malice Eaters, but he disobeyed and brought only one. Like Flick's parents, Magus is extremely disappointed in him. The other members of the Akashic Tower tell Magus he must flee before the hunters arrive so his valuable research can continue. However, Magus insists on staying, as they still have their secret weapon, Akasha, and, moreover, as their leader, it is his duty to fight alongside them to the bitter end. Meanwhile, the investigation team finally arrives outside the cave where the Akashic Tower's base is located. They plan to enter and strike before the Akashic Tower has a chance to retaliate. Thus, Strand and Shatorai will rely on Gar to clear the way for them. Sven stares at Citri and Liz with a determined expression. Trust me. We're going into that cave to end this. I need to prove I still have courage. Despite the tension, they nod and advance together. Outside, members of the Akashic Tower are already in position, mounted on majestic flying lions. They don't attack immediately, it's merely a distraction. Inside the laboratory, Magus presses a sequence of buttons, watching with a cold smile as an imposing stone statue begins to crumble. You don't stand a chance against this, he murmurs. From the dust, a colossal golem emerges, its towering structure seemingly invincible. Magus proclaims with confidence, this is the Akashic Tower's ultimate weapon. The golem moves out of the cave, where Gar, the battle-hardened veteran, is waiting. He raises his heavy sword with both hands, blocking a devastating blow from the golem. The impact echoes like thunder. Even as the weight of age strains his arms, Gar does not retreat. Seizing the opening, the tower members command their flying lions to attack, circling in the skies and staying out of reach of the treasure hunters. Amid the chaos, two prisoners quietly attempt to cut the ropes binding them. One of the flying lions dives towards Sven, injuring him severely, but he heals himself with his powers. Don't stop now, he shouts to his allies. The battle seems hopeless, until a gust of wind and a flash of light interrupt the fight. Liz arrives with superhuman speed, bringing down one of the flying lions. Is that all you've got? She taunts, reinvigorating the treasure hunters. Meanwhile, in the forest, Craig and Tino are alone. Craig hesitates, worried about Liz. Tino, with her keen senses, detects something unusual and asks if she should investigate. Craig reassures her, thinking it's just animals. They don't realize the prisoners have escaped and are wandering through the forest, confused. Back on the battlefield, Liz weaves between the golem's attacks, moving like lightning. Despite her confidence, her strikes aren't enough to inflict significant damage. What are you waiting for, Gar? Are you going to let me do all the work? She jabs. Gar responds with his ice axe, freezing part of the golem, but the monster surprises everyone by leaping back with incredible agility. This is, like the Annam, Liz murmurs, referring to one of the feared 6 laments. Did they model it after him? She shakes her head. Doesn't matter. I'll destroy it anyway. The golem opens its hand, revealing a concealed cannon. It fires, and Liz barely evades, the shot grazing her side. She retreats, panting, realizing this foe is more dangerous than she expected. Citri observes the battle, calculating. We can't beat it like this. We need to drain its energy. Liz, irritated, takes the comment as a challenge. I can handle it myself. She charges again, executing a fierce combo that briefly knocks the golem down. Gar tries to finish it off with another ice strike, but the golem activates boosters on its back, taking flight and leaving everyone stunned. At that moment, Craig finally arrives on the scene. He walks calmly, seemingly oblivious to the chaos around him. How's it going? He asks casually, while Tino stays close, visibly nervous. The golem, noticing Craig's presence, flies toward him with intent to crush. But Craig doesn't even flinch. He continues walking, unfazed, as the treasure hunters feel the tension in the air. The fight is about to end, Sven says confidently. The strongest hunter is here. Then, as if fate itself intervenes, the golem is suddenly flung backward before it can reach Craig, slamming into the cave wall with enough force to deactivate it. The treasure hunters exchange bewildered looks, their jaws dropping, and Sven eagerly asks which secret technique Craig used this time. But Craig, adjusting his clearly broken night vision goggles, replies in an almost indifferent tone. What golem? The battle is officially over, and the treasure hunters take advantage of the moment to storm the Akashic Tower's base, looting everything they can carry. The tension dissolves into temporary relief as Sven begins issuing orders. After a brief pause, Craig receives a report from Citri, who thanks him for sending Liz at the crucial moment. However, Citri's tone soon shifts. She informs him that the Akashic Tower is not completely destroyed and intends to finish them off once and for all, a task she insists on handling personally. Meanwhile, at a makeshift base deep in the forest, Magus's disciples regroup with the alchemist and two prisoners who escaped during the chaos. The prisoners, still shaken, report that the red-haired woman among the treasure hunters was undoubtedly Sophia. The revelation sends a slight shiver through Magus, who orders Sophia to be brought back for questioning. However, he decides that continuing the fight would be unwise. He has seen enough of Craig's power to understand that facing him again would be suicidal. His men return with a frightened young woman, but they quickly realize she isn't Sophia. She tries to explain, but before the commotion escalates, the real Sophia enters the room. Everyone freezes. She looks different, holding a wine bottle in one hand, her posture relaxed like someone who has planned every move. Without ceremony, Sophia removes her wig and cloak, revealing herself to be none other than Citri. Shock ripples through the room. Magus rises from his chair, incredulous, and demands an explanation. Citri, with an enigmatic smile, begins to speak. She reveals that Sophia never truly existed and that her entire infiltration was orchestrated to test Magus's experiments against high-level hunters. Despite her calm tone, the tension is palpable. When Magus tries to retaliate verbally, Citri cuts him off coldly, stating that his research has already been confiscated and that the remaining disciples will be taken into custody. At that moment, Magus makes a final desperate move, attacking Citri with a devastating fire spell. Before the attack reaches her, something bright appears between them. It's the golden slime, a creation Craig had lost months ago. It absorbs the spell effortlessly and, to Magus's horror, begins consuming the fallen flying lion beside it. Citri watches the scene with unsettling calm and finally explains the creature's true purpose. The slime is her masterpiece, an entity capable of consuming mana and growing infinitely, something she created as an alternative to golems. Magus realizes he is facing someone far more calculated and ruthless than he ever imagined. Amid the chaos, the disciples activate a smoke bomb, trying to help Magus escape. He runs desperately but is stopped by a muscular figure blocking the doorway. Before he can react, he is brutally thrown down the stairs. Citri descends calmly, like a predator already certain its prey is cornered. "You inspired me, Magus, but it's time to end your story." Her words are as sharp as blades. She activates her secret weapon and eliminates Magus. Afterward, the disciples are captured, and Citri takes measures to erase everyone's memories, including those of her assistant. Later, when she meets with Craig, she hands him her report and casually mentions that she needs to be more cautious in the future when handling unstable materials. Craig, as usual, simply raises an eyebrow, having no clue what she truly means. After the meeting with government representatives, Craig and Citri proceed to discuss the confiscated items from the Akashic Tower base. As usual, Craig makes an unusual request, wanting to keep the Akashic Golem and, even more surprisingly, something that rhymes with water. Craig's response leaves the government representatives glancing at each other in bewilderment. While they understand his interest in the Golem, they are utterly confused by his request for Malice Eaters. With his sharp hearing, however, Craig mishears Malice as water and, with impressive nonchalance, replies that what he truly wants is to drink it. Everyone begins to worry about his mental state, but in the end, the representatives agree to hand over the Malice Eaters, although they refuse to give up the Golem. Citri thanks Craig for the negotiation and prepares to recover the flying lions, while Gar approaches Craig with concerning news. Gar, wearing a serious expression, speaks about a treasure hunter group called Colliding Lightning, led by Arnold Hale, a level 7 hunter. Craig, however, claims not to know Arnold and makes a joke about him being from a show called The Terminator. Gar laughs at the reference but explains that Arnold is known for having slain a dragon. He pats Craig on the back, but due to Craig's strength, even that gesture destroys one of Gar's safety rings. Gar leaves, and Craig momentarily fixes his gaze on a poster for a grand relic auction, only to realize he lacks the money to participate. Considering whether to ask Citri for a loan, who still hasn't repaid her own debt, Craig is interrupted by a receptionist introducing herself as Chloe G.'s niece. She mentions her uncle was in a good mood, which gives Craig a clue that something is up. Citri arrives, and they leave, crossing paths with Arnold and his group. Back at the clan, Citri introduces an adorable Malice Eater cub she trained not to harm her or Craig. The cub excitedly leaps onto Craig, but its playful touches are strong enough to activate his safety rings. Thankfully, Citri removes the cub before it consumes the rings, calling it Gatorade since Craig thought it was something to drink. Unbothered by the misunderstanding, Craig needs to recharge his relics. During the conversation, he learns that Lucia, his mage friend, is battling a monstrous boss in a dungeon and cannot return home. Citri then gives Craig a special relic capable of saving a spell for emergencies. Although he already owns one, Citri insists he keep the new one and even suggests wearing it on his left ring finger. She then offers Craig a massage, seeming to enjoy it more than he does. When Craig mentions his relics are out of mana, Citri assures him to leave it all to her. Citri gathers all the treasure hunters and announces special training in magical cultivation techniques developed by Craig. She explains it will be grueling but promises that anyone who completes it will reach Lucia's level of power. Everyone is shocked by this claim, but since Citri stated the method was created by Craig, many are willing to try. Two elves, Lapis and Chris, stand to challenge the new methods. Chris, with a mocking tone, suggests Craig should properly greet his sister, claiming she is superior to him in every way. Lapis, though critical, asks Chris to behave. The elves, known for their long lives and exceptional magical talents, often look down on non-elite mages. Lapis then turns to Citri, questioning if she's sure the training can make anyone a mage on Lucia's level. Craig confidently reaffirms that Lucia became so powerful through similar training, prompting Marietta, a mage from Sven's group, to nervously volunteer first. However, the training isn't what she expected. Instead of something intricate, she simply has to recharge Craig's magical rings. To everyone's surprise, this seemingly simple task proves extremely difficult, as the rings never seem to fully recharge no matter how much mana Marietta pours in. Citri insists Marietta continue until she finally manages to fully charge one ring, collapsing from exhaustion. Citri then reveals there are more rings to charge, forcing Marietta to continue until she faints again. Citri explains to the group that most people's mana capacity peaks during adolescence, but by depleting it repeatedly, one can slightly increase their maximum limit. The treasure hunters, weary from the process, complain that the method is too time-consuming, even for elves. Smiling enigmatically, Citri unveils a solution. She administers a special medicine, dropping a few drops into Marietta's mouth. The mage jolts awake, only to faint again from the medicine's awful taste. Citri explains that Marietta's mana capacity increased and was successfully recharged. She reveals that this was exactly how Lucia became so powerful, emphasizing that Lucia wasn't born extraordinary but achieved her prowess through hard work and the same medicine. Everyone is impressed, especially Craig, who never knew this detail about Lucia. After the task of charging the magical rings, Citri begins teasing the elves, questioning whether they, as a proud race of magical prodigies, could achieve the same as Lucia. She challenges Chris and Lapis to try the training. They accept without hesitation, and Citri summons her chimera, which brings a bag full of all Craig's magical rings. Chris begins the process of recharging the rings, while other mages in the clan also strive to increase their mana capacity. With the training underway, Craig and Citri head to Liz's house. Upon arrival, Liz emerges in a towel, fresh out of the bath, as she had forgotten to grab her clothes. Citri immediately covers Craig's eyes to prevent him from seeing Liz undressed. After a brief exchange about the situation, Craig reveals that he had planned a party to celebrate the safe return of Liz and Citri. Surprised and grateful, Liz tries to hug Craig, but Citri stops her. Without hesitation, Craig also invites Tino to join them. At the restaurant, as everyone helps themselves to food and drinks, Liz and Citri engage in a lively argument. Citri challenges Liz to a drinking game but sabotages her sister's glass. However, Craig, always alert, switches the glasses, leading Citri to drink the tampered beverage instead. Soon, she becomes drunk and begins reprimanding Craig, accusing him of seeing her only as a walking wallet. She even suggests he repay his debts with his body, but before she can act on it, Liz swiftly intervenes, restraining her and throwing her to the floor. The chaos doesn't end there. One of the treasure hunters accidentally bumps into Arnold, the renowned dragon-slaying hunter, who immediately takes offense. He demands respect, asserting his rank as a level 7 hunter. Liz, intrigued by the situation, approaches with a provocative smile, declaring that she's there to serve him. Arnold dismissively calls her a brat and tells her to go home. Enraged, Liz throws her drink in his face, then smashes a jug over his head, calling him weak and unworthy of being a level 7 hunter. Although furious, Arnold doesn't retaliate directly. Craig arrives just in time, sensing the tension, and diffuses the situation by leading Liz away and apologizing for her behavior. The next day, Eva speaks with Craig about Arnold, revealing that he was responsible for defeating a lightning dragon. She advises making amends to avoid further trouble. Craig, however, hopes Liz's attack was enough to make Arnold forget the incident. Nevertheless, he asks Eva to arrange a meeting with Arnold, with Gar acting as a mediator. During their discussion about the lightning dragon, Craig, in his irreverent way, mentions that he'd like to try it grilled, shocking Eva. She explains that dragon meat is incredibly valuable, especially as a magical ingredient, but Craig insists, recounting how Citri once cooked him a dragon steak in the past, and it was delicious. Craig continues rambling about how lightning dragons must be delicious and then warns Eva not to take him seriously, as all he really wants is to eat meat. Meanwhile, Arnold's henchmen are fuming over the treatment they received at the bar. Although annoyed, Arnold recognizes that Liz is genuinely strong. Not willing to let the incident slide, he decides to take his team to the guild. Upon arriving at the reception desk, the attendant asks if they are there to file a complaint, having heard about the bar incident. A henchman with a fake Josu-style haircut responds that they aren't there to complain but to find out who attacked their boss. At that moment, Gar appears and addresses Arnold, informing him that the girl he's looking for is named Liz, also known as the Silenced Shadow due to her swift and silent movements. Arnold, defiant, asks who Gar thinks he is. Gar introduces himself and explains that he knew Arnold's group would arrive in town soon and had already warned Liz's guardian, though apparently, the guardian forgot. This enrages Arnold's henchmen further, as someone had overlooked their boss. Gar continues, explaining that despite Craig's laid-back demeanor, he is an 8th-level treasure hunter known as the Man of 1,000 Tricks. The henchmen are terrified upon hearing this, but Gar reassures them that Craig does not tolerate bullying. If they promise not to cause more trouble, he will keep Liz in check. Gar then reveals that Craig sent a message to Arnold, pulling a small piece of paper from his pocket. The note reads, "Lightning dragons must be really delicious. Arnold should bring me one." Gar walks away, but Arnold, furious, interprets the message as an insult and a challenge, ordering his men to prepare for a fight. Meanwhile, in the office, Craig tells Eva that his debt to Citri has reached 10 digits, leaving her horrified. Craig tries to calm her, explaining that Citri offered 2 solutions. The first would be to throw him in jail, which would nullify the debt, but Craig cannot do that. The second would be to marry Citri, turning the debt into a family expense. Craig jokes that marriage might be his only solution but asks Eva not to be upset, promising to pay everything off. Eva advises him to stop accruing debts and use the team's funds to settle them, but Craig finds it difficult, especially with the big auction approaching. Meanwhile, Arnold's henchmen try to gather more information about Craig but only manage to hear about his ability to predict the future and how he no longer goes on missions because he finds them boring. They report this back to Arnold, who finds it exaggerated but cannot deny that Craig is an 8th-level hunter. Arnold believes Craig achieved that rank by leading his team rather than through his own strength, yet he still feels confident he can surpass him. Craig tries to forget his debt while enjoying the sun when Tino suddenly leaps onto his balcony, thinking he was smiling at her. She excitedly asks how she can help him, and Craig jokingly says he needs money. Disappointed, she offers to lend him her savings, but he declines, explaining that he owes Citri 10 digits. Tino is shocked, and upon hearing that the debt could be resolved through marriage, she starts coughing up blood, assuming Citri wants to monopolize him. Craig says it was a joke and invites her for a walk. Along the way, Tino suggests he go to a high-level vault to retrieve relics and make money, but Craig doesn't want to risk his life. Meanwhile, Arnold and his group find Craig's clan building and are surprised to see him standing alone in front of it. Craig recognizes them from the bar, and the men prepare to attack him. Tino challenges them, but they claim they have no business with her. Suddenly, Craig apologizes for Liz's actions and even offers to kneel, but Tino stops him. She begins insulting Arnold's group, infuriating them further. Arnold decides to fight, but Craig suggests they take it to the main street to avoid collateral damage. During the confrontation, Arnold accuses Craig of relying on his team to reach level 8. Craig, however, uses a gravity spell created by Lucia to subdue them, explaining that if Arnold wants to face him again, he'll first need to defeat the 3 strongest teams in his clan. After the battle, Craig takes Tino out for dessert again. Tino, still feeling guilty for not meeting Craig's expectations, apologizes, but he reassures her, saying she did her best. Tino, however, cannot shake her sense of responsibility and asks Craig for the location of a vault containing precious relics, declaring she will retrieve them for him to help pay off part of his debt. Craig, surprised by her determination, is left speechless but touched by her concern.